The morning sun rose slowly over the long, dusty trail, painting the sky with soft orange colors. The wagons in the traveling group were lined up, horses tied beside them, and families preparing for another long day of walking toward the western towns. Among them was a thin young girl named Lila, only 11 years old. She moved quietly, carrying small bundles of firewood she had collected before sunrise. She always tried her best to help, even if no one thanked her for it. Lila had lost both her real parents a few years ago. After that, she lived with her stepmother, who only took her in because she needed someone to help with chores. Lila remembered a time when her father used to hold her hand, tell her stories, and make her feel loved. After he passed away, everything changed. Her stepmother rarely spoke to her kindly and treated her as if she were an extra weight slowing everyone down. Now, traveling on the trail, the stepmother and her new husband never let Lila ride in the wagon. They said she was old enough to walk and strong enough to carry things. Because of this, Lila spent most of the journey walking behind them, quietly watching the world pass by and hoping no one noticed her tired steps. That morning, something felt different. Her stepmother had been whispering to her husband for days, glancing at Lila with an expression she couldn't read. Lila didn't want trouble, so she kept her head down and focused on her chores. She fetched water, packed leftover food, and made sure the small cooking tools were put away. When the group was ready to leave, Lila's stepmother walked up to her with a strange, tight smile. "Lila," she said in a cold voice, "stay behind for a moment. We forgot a small bag of oats near the old log." "Go get it," Lila nodded quickly. She never argued. She just wanted peace. She hurried to the log her stepmother mentioned, her small feet kicking up little clouds of dust, but there was no bag. She searched behind bushes. Under the log and around the nearby rocks, nothing. When she looked back toward the trail, she froze. The wagons were moving. Her stepmother was already climbing into her own wagon. The horses began pulling forward. The wheels turned faster and faster. "Wait," Lila shouted. Waving her arms and running back toward the main trail, no one stopped. The last wagon turned the corner around a dry hill, and then the whole group disappeared from sight. Lila stood alone on the empty trail, breathing hard, dust settling around her feet. For the first few minutes, she believed they would come back. She waited, standing perfectly still, listening for the sound of horses returning or wagon wheels rolling on gravel. She heard nothing. Minutes passed. Then hours. The sun climbed higher, burning her skin and making her eyes sting. Lila sat down beside the old log, hugging her knees to her chest. She told herself not to cry, but her small body shook anyway. She wiped her face with trembling hands and whispered, "They will come back. They just forgot me for a moment. They will remember." But deep inside her heart, a quiet fear told her the truth. Her stepmother had not forgotten her. She had left her behind on purpose. As the day grew hotter, Lila tried to walk in the direction the wagons had gone. She followed the tracks for a long time, but soon the marks became hard to see. The wind blew sand across the ground, hiding the trail until it looked like an untouched plain. She stopped walking and looked around. The land stretched far in every direction, dry grass, scattered bushes, and lonely rocks. The sky felt too big, too empty. Lila felt small, smaller than she had ever felt in her life. She turned back to the log where she had waited earlier. Her feet were sore, and her throat felt dry. She sat down again, pulling her thin clothing around her as the afternoon wind began to cool. Lila tried to stay hopeful. Maybe another travel group would pass by. Maybe some farmer or hunter would find her. She kept listening, hoping for voices or hoofbeats. Nothing came. In the late afternoon, her stomach growled loudly. She hadn't eaten anything since early morning. She searched the ground for berries or anything she recognized, but the land was dry and empty. Lila picked up a small stick and poked the soil, pretending she was helping her father in the garden again. It was a memory that warmed her, but it also made her heart ache. When evening approached, the sky turned pink and purple. The wind grew colder. Lila forced herself to gather dry grass and small branches to create a bit of cover near the log. She had seen other travelers make simple shelters before. so she tried to copy them. She placed the grass between branches and curled up beside it. But it didn't keep her very warm. She hugged her knees again, rocking slowly, whispering small prayers she learned long ago. She asked for safety. She asked for someone kind to find her. She asked for strength not to fall asleep too soon because darkness felt frightening. Night finally came. The stars filled the sky, bright and countless. Lila stared at them, wondering if her parents could see her from somewhere far away. She whispered, "I miss you," even though no one answered. A few times, she thought she heard footsteps, but each time it was only the wind moving through dry grass. She tried to stay awake, but her body was too tired. Her eyes grew heavy. She lay on her side, pulling her thin scarf over her shoulders. She drifted in and out of sleep. Every sound woke her: rustling leaves, distant animal calls, and the cold touch of the night wind. She tried not to cry again, but tears kept sliding down her cheeks. When morning arrived, she was weak and shivering. Her lips felt dry. Her stomach hurt from hunger. She struggled to sit up, pressing a hand to her forehead. The sunlight was bright, almost harsh. She tried calling out again. "Hello? Is anyone there? Please, please help me." The land stayed silent. Lila thought about walking again, maybe trying to follow the faint direction the wagons took, but her legs felt heavy and shaky. She stood up anyway, taking one step, then another. But after only a few minutes, she had to sit down again. She felt lost, not only on the land, but inside her heart. She had always hoped her stepmother would one day change, would one day treat her kindly. Now she understood that the trail wasn't an accident. She realized her stepmother wanted her gone. A soft breeze brushed her face, carrying the smell of horses somewhere far away. Lila lifted her head quickly, listening with all her strength. She didn't hear anything else, so she wondered if she had imagined it. Then, suddenly a faint rhythm echoed across the land: hoofbeats. They were slow and steady, coming from the direction behind the hill. Lila's heart began to beat faster. She stood up, swaying a little. She brushed dust off her dress and blinked toward the horizon. A lone rider appeared, moving calmly along the trail. The sun shone behind him, making him look almost like a tall shadow on a strong horse. As he came closer, she saw that he wore a wide hat and a long coat covered in dust. The man sat with confidence, as if riding across long trails was something he had done his entire life. Lila felt scared. She didn't know if he would be friendly or dangerous. She tried to step back behind the log, but lost balance and fell to her knees. The rider noticed her at once. He slowed his horse and rode closer. When he reached her, he gently pulled his horse to a stop and got down. His face was calm, serious, and kind. He had sharp eyes that didn't look angry or harsh. They only looked concerned. "Are you all right?" he asked in a gentle voice. Lila opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. She swallowed and tried again. I got left behind," she whispered. The man knelt beside her and offered his water flask. "Drink slowly," he said. Lila took the flask with shaking hands. The cool water felt like life returning to her. She handed it back carefully. "What's your name?" he asked Lila. She said softly. He nodded. "I'm Daniel Hayes." Lila didn't know who he was, but later she would learn he was the richest cowboy in the whole region, owner of a huge ranch, respected by everyone for his fairness and kind heart. But at that moment, he was simply the only person who stopped, the only person who noticed her, the only person who cared enough to ask her name. Daniel looked around the empty land, then back at her. "How long have you been alone?" Lila lowered her head. "Since yesterday. Maybe longer." "Where is your family?" he asked. She hesitated, then whispered, "They left me." Daniel's jaw tightened for a moment, but his voice stayed gentle. "You must be hungry. We should get you somewhere safe." He carefully lifted her into his arms, placed her on his horse, and climbed behind her to keep her steady. As the horse began walking, Lila leaned back slightly. Feeling warmth and safety she hadn't felt in a long time, the long trail ahead no longer frightened her. For the first time since being abandoned, she felt hope. Daniel kept one protective arm around her as they rode toward the distant ranch, toward a new life. H came into view as Daniel and Lila rode over the last small hill. It was larger than anything Lila had ever seen. Wide open fields spread out in every direction, dotted with grazing cattle. Wooden fences ran for long distances, guiding horses and animals into safe paths. Several barns stood tall and strong, painted in deep red colors that stood out against the dry land. Smoke rose from the chimney of the main house, carrying the warm smell of cooking food. Lila stared quietly, trying to understand that such a place could truly exist. She had spent months feeling unwanted and invisible during the long journey on the trail. Now, she was being brought into a place that looked full of life, care, and comfort. Her small hands held the saddle tightly as she felt the horse move under her. The gentle sway of the ride and Daniel's steady presence behind her made her feel safe in a way she did not fully understand. Daniel slowed the horse as they arrived at the main yard. Several ranch hands were working nearby repairing fences, brushing horses, and loading hay. When they saw Daniel arriving with a small girl on his horse, they all paused in surprise. Daniel was a man known for traveling alone, independent, and focused. Seeing a young stranger sitting in front of him was unusual. One of the workers, an older man with gray hair and a friendly face, stepped forward. "Boss? Everything all right?" Daniel nodded. "This here is Lila," he said calmly. "I found her alone on the trail. We're going to take care of her for now." The older man's expression softened at once. "Of course," he said kindly, giving Lila a gentle nod. Daniel lifted Lila off the horse and helped her stand. Her legs were weak, so he kept a steady hand on her shoulder until she felt stable. He handed the reins to one of the workers and guided Lila toward the main house. Inside, the house was warm and smelled of fresh bread and stew. The floors were wooden and clean, the walls decorated with simple pictures and neatly placed shelves. A woman with her sleeves rolled up, clearly in the middle of cooking, looked up in surprise when Daniel entered. "Daniel Hayes," she said with raised eyebrows. "You don't usually bring guests." "This is Lila," Daniel replied gently. "She was left alone on the trail. She needs food, rest, and a safe place." The woman softened at once. "Poor child," she whispered. "Come here, dear." Lila hesitated, unsure if she should walk forward. Daniel placed a reassuring hand on her back. "It's all right. You're safe here," he said. Lila stepped toward the woman, who gave her a warm smile and guided her to a wooden chair near the table. "Sit down, sweetheart," she said. "I'll get you something warm to eat." Lila sat quietly, not used to such kindness. The woman placed a bowl of vegetable stew in front of her, along with a piece of soft bread. The smell made Lila's stomach twist with hunger. She picked up the spoon carefully and began to eat, slow at first, and faster, as her hunger took over. Daniel watched her from across the room. He didn't rush her or ask many questions. He simply wanted her to feel safe. After she finished eating, the housekeeper brought a small cup of warm water and a soft cloth. "Let me clean your face a little," she said gently. Lila let her, though it felt strange. No one had taken the time to care for her in a long while. It almost made her want to cry again, but she held back. Daniel stepped forward. "Lila, how long were you on the trail alone?" he asked softly. She looked down at her hands. "Since yesterday," she said quietly. "Maybe longer. I wasn't sure about the time." Daniel took a slow breath. "And your family? They just left you?" Lila nodded slowly. "My stepmother told me to go get something. When I came back, they were gone." Her voice shook, but she forced herself to stay calm. "I tried to follow, but the tracks disappeared." The housekeeper paused her work. Daniel's jaw clenched slightly, though he kept his voice gentle. "You're safe now," he said. "No one here will leave you behind." Those words made something warm spread in Lila's chest. She lowered her eyes, not sure how to respond, but grateful for the comfort. Daniel turned to the housekeeper. "Please prepare the small guest room for her," he said. "She needs rest." The housekeeper nodded. "Of course. I'll make the bed right away." Daniel looked back at Lila. "Come," he said softly. Offering his hand, she placed her small hand in his. and he guided her through the house to a small room at the end of the hallway. Inside was a neatly made bed, soft blankets, a small dresser, and a window that looked out onto the fields. "This will be your room for now," Daniel said. "You can rest here as long as you need." Lila walked slowly toward the bed. She touched the blanket with her fingertips. It was warm, clean, and soft, nothing like the rough ground she had slept on the night before. "Thank you," she whispered. Her voice so small, it was barely a sound. Daniel nodded and stepped out to give her privacy. "Rest now," he said. "You're safe." Lila lay down on the bed carefully at first, as if afraid she would ruin it. Then, as she sank into the softness, her eyes closed. Within moments, she drifted into a deep sleep, one without fear or cold. She slept for hours. When she woke, the sun was lower in the sky. It took her a moment to remember where she was. She looked around the room, feeling the quiet comfort of the place. It felt unreal, like a dream she didn't want to end. She stood up and walked toward the window. Outside, she saw workers moving cattle toward the far gate. Horses trotted across open land. The peaceful scene made her feel a strange mix of calm and wonder. A soft knock sounded on the door. Lila stepped back quickly, unsure if she should speak. The door opened gently, and Daniel peeked in. "You awake?" he asked with a kind smile. Lila nodded. "Come join us for dinner," he said. "If you feel up to it." Lila followed him to the dining area, where the housekeeper and two workers sat around a wooden table. Everyone greeted her kindly. The housekeeper placed a plate of warm food in front of her: mashed potatoes, cooked vegetables, and a small slice of roasted meat. Lila ate quietly but with gratitude. She kept glancing at Daniel, trying to understand him. He was calm, strong, and gentle all at the same time. He didn't ask personal questions, didn't hurry her, didn't treat her like a burden. She didn't know that people like him still existed. After dinner, Daniel took a seat near the fireplace and motioned for her to join him. She sat on the edge of a nearby chair. "I'd like to know a little more about you," he said gently. "Only if you want to talk." Lila stared at the floor before speaking. I don't have much to tell." She twisted her fingers. "My real parents. They were kind, but they passed away." Her voice wavered. Daniel nodded patiently. "I'm sorry, Lila," she continued softly. "My stepmother took me after that, but she didn't want me. She always said I slowed her down." She took a small breath. "She left me on the trail." Daniel listened without interrupting. He didn't show anger, but his eyes grew serious. "Lila," he said gently, "your worth is not tied to how someone treated you. You deserve kindness. You deserve safety." Lila swallowed hard. No adult had ever spoken to her like that. His words felt heavy and warm, almost too much for her to carry. "If you want," Daniel continued, "you can stay here on the ranch, as long as you need. No one will push you away." Lila blinked with surprise. "Stay here?" "Yes," he said softly. "You're not alone anymore." A tear slipped down her cheek before she could stop it. She quickly wiped it away, embarrassed. Daniel pretended not to notice, giving her space to feel her emotions. "You don't have to decide anything now," he added. "Just rest. Heal. Let yourself feel safe again." Lila nodded with a small tremble in her voice. "Thank you," she whispered again. That night, when she returned to her small room, she sat on the bed and held the blanket close. She wasn't used to kindness, but she could feel something gentle blooming inside her heart, quiet, growing trust. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she belonged somewhere and she didn't know it yet. But Daniel Hayes wasn't just giving her shelter. He was preparing to change her future in ways she could never imagine. Days turned into weeks, and life on the ranch slowly settled into a warm routine for Lila. Every morning, she woke to the smell of fresh bread, the sound of horses in the yard, and the gentle voices of workers greeting each other. At first, she stayed close to the house, unsure of her place or what she was allowed to do. But Daniel never rushed her. He let her find her own way. One morning, when she stepped outside, the sun was rising softly over the wide fields. Daniel stood near the fence, checking on one of the horses. When he saw Lila, he gave her a small smile. "You feeling stronger today?" he asked. Lila nodded. "Yes. Would you like to help with something simple?" he asked gently. "Only if you want to." She hesitated for a moment, then nodded again. She had always wanted to be useful, not a burden. Daniel handed her a small bucket of oats. "Just sprinkle a little for the chickens in the yard," he said. "They like company." Lila walked toward the chicken coop with slow steps. The chickens clucked softly, moving around her feet. She sprinkled the oats carefully, watching as the chickens pecked happily at the ground. A small smile touched her lips. It felt peaceful. It felt like she belonged. From that day onward, she helped with small tasks, watering the flowers near the house, brushing one of the gentler horses, folding clean linens, and carrying fresh feed to the coop. Everyone at the ranch appreciated her gentle nature. They never shouted at her, never scolded her unfairly, never ignored her. The ranch hands often spoke to her kindly, teaching her little things like how to hold a brush properly or how to carry a bucket without spilling. Lila listened carefully, trying to learn and improve every day. Little by little, she grew more confident. Daniel watched her progress quietly. Every evening, after the day's work, he often sat on the porch with a cup of tea. Lila sometimes joined him, sitting silently while watching the sunset. She didn't need to speak. The calmness between them felt comforting. She began to understand something: a home was not just a place where you lived. A home was where people cared if you ate, if you slept, if you smiled. A home was where someone noticed when you were quiet and asked if you were okay. One evening, as she helped the housekeeper prepare dinner, the housekeeper suddenly paused and said, "Lila, you're looking much healthier these days." Lila blinked. "Really?" "Of course," the woman said warmly. "Your eyes are brighter now, and you smile more." Lila pressed her fingers to her cheek, trying to imagine what a smile looked like on her own face. She didn't realize she'd been doing it more often after dinner that night. Daniel asked her to sit with him in the living room. The fire crackled softly. Warm light filled the room. "Lila," he said gently, "I've been thinking about your future." She held her breath, worried. She thought maybe he would tell her she had to leave. But Daniel continued calmly. "I spoke with the local doctor and the town sheriff. They know what happened to you. They also know you're safe here." Lila felt her heart beat faster with fear. "Am I in trouble?" she asked. Daniel shook his head immediately. "No, you have done nothing wrong." She looked down again, unsure. Daniel leaned forward slightly. "You deserve a proper home, a place that is yours. A place where you never have to be afraid of being left behind again." Lila's fingers trembled slightly. "A home," she whispered. "Yes," Daniel said. "I would like to be your legal guardian. Only if you want that. I don't want to force you." Lila stared at him in shock. She tried to speak, but words wouldn't come. She had never imagined anyone would want to take responsibility for her. She had always believed she was unwanted. Daniel continued gently. "If you want to stay here, I will make sure you have everything you need: food, safety, education, and a peaceful life. You will grow up here, not as a worker or helper, but as part of the family." Tears welled in her eyes before she could stop them. She covered her face with her hands, not wanting to cry in front of him. But the warmth in her chest grew too strong. Daniel reached out and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to decide now. Take your time." But Lila shook her head quickly. "I want to stay," she whispered through her hands. "I don't want to go anywhere else." Daniel let out a soft breath, almost like relief. "Then you will stay." Lila lowered her hands and looked at him. Her eyes were wet but shining. "Thank you," she said, her voice small but firm. Daniel smiled softly. "You're welcome, Lila." For the next few days, paperwork began. Daniel went to town to speak with officials, fill out forms, and sign documents. Everyone in town respected him greatly, so they didn't question his intentions. They only asked what was necessary. Daniel explained that Lila had been abandoned and that he wanted to give her a permanent home. Each night when he returned, he told Lila about the progress. "It's going well," he said one evening, In a few more days, it should all be official. Leela listened quietly, still getting used to the idea that she would have a real place where she belonged. She wasn't just staying temporarily. She wasn't a burden. She wasn't someone to toss aside. She was becoming part of a family, as she helped in the kitchen that night. She hummed a quiet tune. The housekeeper noticed and smiled. "You're happier these days," she said gently. Lila nodded shyly. "I feel safe," she whispered, and she truly did. A week later, Daniel returned home holding a small folder of papers. Leela was feeding the chickens when he approached her. "Leela," he called softly. She turned, dusting her hands on her dress. "It's done," he said. She blinked. "Done?" "Yes," he said with a warm smile. "The papers are approved. You're officially under my guardianship." For a moment, she didn't move. She stood completely still as his words sank in. Then her eyes filled with tears again, soft, grateful tears. She dropped the small bucket of oats and ran to him. She didn't usually run, but her legs moved before she could think. She reached him and hugged him tightly. Daniel gently placed a hand on her back. He didn't hug too tightly, allowing her to choose how close she wanted to be. He let her take comfort, offering warmth and safety without forcing anything. "You're home now," he said quietly. Leela nodded against his coat. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice full of emotion she couldn't describe. He rested his hand softly on her hair. "You're welcome." Life after that was different, not because the ranch changed, but because Lila changed. She woke each morning with a sense of belonging. She did her chores with a light heart, not out of fear or desperation, but out of joy. She learned how to ride a gentle horse under Daniel's guidance. She helped the housekeeper bake bread. She joined the ranch hands when they repaired fences, learning how tools worked. She felt useful. She felt seen. She felt loved in a quiet, steady way. The workers often said, "She's a tough little one," or "She works hard," or "She's becoming part of the ranch family fast." Lila would blush lightly each time, but inside, she felt proud. One evening, Daniel sat with her on the porch as the sky turned golden. "How do you feel?" he asked. Lila looked at the horizon, her eyes soft. "I feel like I have a life now," she said. Daniel nodded with a quiet smile. "You always deserved one." They sat together until the last bit of sunlight faded. Leela felt peaceful, knowing she would never again be abandoned on a lonely trail, never left behind without care, never treated as invisible. The ranch was her home. Daniel was her guardian, and she was finally safe. People in nearby towns often spoke of the richest cowboy, who took in an orphan girl and changed her life forever. But anyone who truly knew the story understood the truth. Daniel hadn't just rescued Lila. Lila had brought warmth, purpose, and a gentle light into his life too, and together they built a new beginning, one filled with hope, kindness, and a future brighter than anything Lila had ever dreamed.